Good morning and welcome to our fifth session of our 2024 Yellowbook training series. I'm Rachel Windett with Sikich University, and I will be on to support you all today. We also have Rachel Hawley with our marketing team with us, and together we'll be screening questions, comments coming through. Today we are joined by Thomas Freeman. Thomas leads the offensive services and DFIR teams here at Sikich. He also is a forensic investigator and specialized in information security. Before I hand it over to him, I want to go over a couple housekeeping items. For tech questions, please submit that in the question bank. And for content-specific questions and comments, please throw those in the chat. We welcome these questions and we'll communicate that to Thomas throughout our session. The Rachels are here to support you. For CPE today, we will have 3 polls. If they come up during the session, please complete all 3 for CPE. And this recording will be made available on demand in a few days following the event. An email will be sent to you with that information. Without further ado, I will hand it over to our facilitators today.
All right, so I'm happy to be here with you today doing this session 5 of your Yellowbook webinar series. It is a pleasure to be with you. Let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm the director at Sikich. As Rachel said, I lead our offensive services and digital forensics incident response teams. I do have a long history in IT going back almost 30 years. Part of that time was spent in development. Some of it has been spent as a IT manager, systems administrator, and then also in information security for quite a while now with a lot of different clubs I'm part of, certifications I've been able to achieve, and so on. So that's kind of my background. Really have enjoyed being able to be a part of Sikich's cybersecurity program and the opportunity we have to help everyone protect our clients and their assets. As we get started, I want to talk today about the mindset of the scammer, how they think and the motivations that they deal with, what they're trying to target, what their resources are. And by bringing that to the table, I want to then talk about how that impacts us and how that sets the foundation for almost everything else when we look at like a security awareness training program. So if your team is building out a security awareness program or you've been through one in the past, this is a foundational concept that will help pull all of that together. Now, some of you may already have a pretty strong cybersecurity background, or you're very familiar with these types of topics. I'm hoping that this particular layout and the way I present this, like I said, it will pull it together into a simple tool that you can use to think through whenever you're dealing with any type of a scam. What I found is that almost every cyber attack has the same root in the mindset of the scammer. If we go back to history and we think about like a snake oil salesman rolling into some western town, a lot of the techniques that a snake oil salesman would use are the same techniques that we see in phishing campaigns or that we see in more aggressive attacks that we might see from a nation state actor. The same scams, the same way of producing urgency, of making you feel like you're offering something to the person. You feel good about yourself for what you're doing. All of those things really come back to their root in the mindset of a scammer, and we see that across the board. So that's kind of the heart of where we're going to go. Scammers have been at it for a while. FBI says that the losses were highest in 5 years, according to the annual report. The most highly reported crimes were phishing expeditions with over 300,000 victims reporting over $52 million in loss just in 2022 alone. And you can imagine, we know that every year, and I've been tracking this since about 2017, almost every year the number has grown exponentially. Not doubled or anything like that, it's grown exponentially. So as we get into 24, the expectation is that we're going to see a massive amount of attacks this year. Ransomware seems to be, now a couple of times we predicted that ransomware was finally kind of moving down on the scale of attacks. And then the next year we see it just, they got a new technique and all of a sudden it blossoms again. Today we see 2 things that are probably the most common attacks. One is ransomware, and the other one is exfiltrating your data and then holding you hostage to the data that they will present it publicly. They'll publish it publicly if you don't pay them. So those are the two types of attacks we see a lot of. Data breach and non-payment scams were the next most common internet scams in 2022, claiming 58,000 and 51,000 respectively per the FBI report. We also have at our convenience a lot of companies who are doing data breach investigation reports. So the instant response companies like Verizon, Palo Alto, Cisco's Talos Group, these companies are putting together reports of the last year's breach investigation results. And so they'll put those together based off of different industries, and you can work through those to see what are the common attacks for my industry, what are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that attackers and threat actors are using in my industry. And I noticed this just in 2019, the Verizon data breach instant response found passwords and phishing as the two primary attack vectors, and both of them involve people. As such, it is people and not technology that are the first line of defense in detecting and stopping many of these attacks, to include new or custom attacks such as CEO fraud or spear phishing. In addition, people can identify and stop attacks that most technologies cannot even filter. So as we think about the technologies that cybersecurity companies are providing you to protect you, the reality is when the human can detect and respond appropriately, they can stop more attacks than the technology can. And that's a pretty interesting fact. It puts a lot of importance on us as team members really doing and knowing what we're doing when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not just for the technical elites. You know, you can't say, well, I'm not a technical person, so it doesn't really count for me. Now, I do need to tell you something about myself. I've been an instructor for over 20 years at a local college. I typically work in classrooms where I have live interaction, and I will go crazy if I don't have any interaction. So you don't have to just ask questions in the chat. You can feel free to say, hey, man, you can say, well, what about this? Or, you know, I heard about a situation, and you can share your thoughts. If you don't interact with me, this is going to be a really long hour for me, and I'm skipping lunch for it. So you owe it to me. You need to interact with me, okay? So let's talk about the mindset of an attacker. And what I want to do that is I want to kind of put this into a series of types of attackers. So we'll make some profiles. And the first profile I want to talk about is really the nation state. And when we talk about a nation state, this is groups who have unlimited resources. You can think of, like, if we were in a classroom right now, I'd ask you to brainstorm and tell me some nation states that you have heard of in cyber attacks in the news. Probably one of the most common ones would be Russia. We'll see oftentimes the news will use these cute characters to describe the attack entity. And so a lot of them will be like Fancy Bear. And whenever there's a bear attached to the name, that's a Russian nation state attacker. Sometimes you'll hear them talk about like a Cozy Panda, and that will be a Chinese attack group, typically tied to a nation state. And so they have unlimited resources. We can think back to Korea. Korea, back about 5 years ago, attacked Sony. They were able to exfiltrate from Sony's network the full Spider-Man movies and several other movies. And then they actually, because Sony wouldn't pay the ransom, they actually made those available publicly on the internet for people to pirate and use. That would be a nation state. Matter of fact, the Lazarus Group is a specific attacker that's directly tied to the Korean nation state. And most of Korea's nuclear program has been monetized, or the way they have paid for that program is through their hacking and ransomware campaigns. So nation states, oftentimes very politically motivated. They have unlimited time to invest. They have unlimited resources, and their targets are usually international interest. And so, you know, I will do a penetration test where I try to attack somebody's network and gain access to their company's network. And oftentimes I will see that the encryption is considered weak by the vulnerability scanning software that I use. It'll say the encryption is weak. Well, it's true, the encryption is weak. But the reality is that in order to attack that, I would have to somehow get your traffic to flow through my system. And the only way I could do that would be to be in charge of a border gateway device, which all of the different internet is broken into these regions, and there are border gateway devices that allow that traffic to flow between those regions. And so nation states very often are able to control those particular devices, those routers. And when they're controlling that device, they can capture that traffic as it flows through it. It's not something you and I are going to do in a coffee shop. But then secondly, you have to decrypt on the fly this encryption, and then you can either pull data from it or you can inject data into it, re-encrypt it, and then post it. The reality of most people having the resources to do that are very limited. The only groups who typically are going to do that are going to be nation states. And so most of us think, well, we're not going to be the target of a nation state. So as we talk about like nation states, China's right at the top of that list. And it just blows my mind to think that they've actually exfiltrated the intellectual property to build a complete Boeing airplane. That's amazing to me. The reality is that you don't have to be necessarily a complete political interest. Some of the political interest that China has is just in literally being able to beat us economically at the production of our products. So most of you are going to have clients or relationships with companies that are specifically dealing with manufacturing or other intellectual property that nation states may want to gain access to. This would be the type of thing that a nation state would go after. Thank you very much for your comment there, Jeff. I appreciate that. Thinking about, the fact that in anti-fraud and dealing with large retailers, online translations, you've seen how important it is that the people harnessing the technology are just as important as the technology itself. And the reality is we can put all kinds of controls in place, but the person who hits, yes, allow those macros in my Excel file, they just bypass most of our technology. So it is very important that we are trained properly, right? All right, let's keep going here. That's nation states. I want you to realize that they have their own motivation and they have really unlimited resources and time. All right. The next one I want to talk about are the criminal groups. And with criminal groups, their motivation really is money. That's the primary goal behind it. So a lot of ransomware, a lot of other activities really revolve around fraud, getting money, right? Their resources are various. So we find that some of the groups have partnered together and combined into large groups, and then others are very minor. And we've even seen, and this is kind of growing now, is a merging between nation state and criminal. We see a partnership a lot of times between those two. And we're even seeing it to the point that local mafia is being tied into some of the more international criminal groups. So they're getting, resources are being supplemented by either a nation state or maybe even a mafia group. Their time investment, they can be pretty patient. They have time to do this. And their primary target is going to be anywhere there's a financial opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily financial institutions. If you think about it, a healthcare, a place that has surgery going, very likely they will pay quickly a ransom in order to keep that facility running, even though it may not be considered primarily about finances. It might even be a nonprofit. The reality is it becomes very much a resource for finances to a criminal group.
We do have a comment that came through. You have to appreciate that level of redundancy in customer service. They're abhorrent as bad actors, but if you don't respect what they're doing as a fraud fighter, then you're not going to be able to beat them.
That is exactly right. If you don't take them seriously, you're going to make big mistakes. You're going to miss key issues. And really, the security controls that you would use at an audit level literally do help and assist in these kind of areas. So they overlap. A lot of what we look at, again, from a scam standpoint, works with audit, fraud, financial fraud, as well as technical fraud. In this particular case, someone said that their former client, the employee paid the ransomware twice before they notified the incident response team. Oh my, I can't even imagine. So as a digital forensics incident response director, I work with teams on a regular basis to perform IR tabletop exercises where we pretend to have an actual event and we have to work through it. We work with clients who are dealing with incident response issues. I cannot imagine Tram having one of them say that their team paid the ransom twice and the technical incident response team never was made aware of it. That is just mind-boggling. Shows the issue with people not being trained properly. So another question, are perpetrators actually caught and prosecuted? Yes, that does happen. So through the course of the investigations, oftentimes they can identify some of the key leaders and key players. And so what they'll do is they'll put an international warrant out for their arrest, and then the attackers or the bad guys, the bad threat actors, they'll have to stay in Russia or some Eastern Bloc country where they're not going to be extradited, and they'll just stay there for either the rest of their life, or they think that they found some way that they can go to some party in Switzerland or somewhere like that, and as they get on a plane and get off, very often they've been able to be caught, captured, and then brought to trial. There are a lot of them that will never be caught. That's the reality. But yes, there are some that are being caught, and it happens on a regular basis. I see news articles related to it pretty regularly. Am I seeing specific trends in attacks on administrative networks versus process systems such as SCADA? So with SCADA, for those who don't know, we think of these as like wastewater treatment facilities, water treatment facilities, nuclear programs, where the controls or the network that's in use is usually completely segmented and separated from the internet, and the attacks on those have to be completely different. I don't know of trends. I would say that attacks on internet-connected devices is going to be way higher than SCADA. At the same time, we do see regular attacks on SCADA, and we see them actually being very effective. Probably the most well-known attack was an attack. It's the most well-known, and I can't think of the name of it right now. I apologize. But it was an attack where the U.S. and Israel together attacked an Iranian nuclear program. And what they did is, because it was internet separated, they actually made malware that was designed to go onto their vendors' software, their vendors' tools. And so the vendor would carry the malware with them without knowing it. It wouldn't reveal itself until it was connected to the Iranian nuclear program devices. But they carried it through the checkout points. They got all the way into the nuclear facility, plugged it into the device, and then the malware was released. And as it went out, it did massive damage to that Iranian nuclear program. Would having a good system of backup controls typically mitigate the need to pay the ransom? Okay, so historically, yes. We have generated, or we have done a really good job technically of putting in place what we call backups that can't be changed. So they're called immutable backups. And what that does is it allows us to back up a network, within an hour and have that backup offsite, so that if you were to attack my local network and delete everything there, my backup would still be good. It'd be offsite. It'd be immutable. And in some of those cases, we've been able to spin up servers that can release that backup and have it emulate your current network without even having to go through the process of rebuilding all the machines. And that gives us time then to go and rebuild the machines and give you a good, safe network. So it is possible. We do see that a lot. The problem is while we've gotten very good at that, that's why we see the double extortion model, where the attacker exfiltrates data very slowly over periods of time. The normal dwell time for an attacker is somewhere between 90 to 180 days in your network. So they get into the network and they move very quietly, very slowly, and they exfiltrate data over that time, so that when they're ready to do the ransomware, you can say, well, I'm going to restore my backups, and I don't have to worry about you. And they say, well, we also have your data, and we're going to make your data publicly available if you don't pay us. And that's where that came from. It was their second option to try to make you pay the ransom. So we are seeing that. We see a lot of companies paying the ransom, and there's a huge argument over whether they should or shouldn't. I'm going to stay out of that today, okay? All right, let's keep moving here. Thank you for the interaction. I love it. All right, let's talk about the next one. The next guy is a thrill seeker, okay? These we see a lot of. Matter of fact, a lot of guys who currently are security experts had their start as a thrill seeker. They just love the idea of figuring out how to crack something, how to break into something, how to do it. You lock a door and their first goal is to figure out how they can get past it. I grew up going to a church school that literally was across the street from my house. And every day, during the summer, the principal's kids would literally come across the street and play with me all day. And as we got older, we would go across the street and play on the school grounds and on the church grounds. Literally, we broke into and learned how to pick the locks of every lock in that building just because it was locked. There's nothing there that we cared about. It didn't do us any good. We just wanted to do it. That's a thrill seeker. They're wanting to learn. It's a hobby to them. Their resources are typically very limited. Their time investment, usually pretty short. They're not looking to spend a whole lot of time on things. And their target almost always is technology, but not always. Almost always, okay? This is a very common one. Thrill seekers, they're interesting. Some people don't really want to prosecute or deal with them in that sense, although they can be bad for what we're doing. One of the things I like to point out is that for the bad actor, their tools are typically free. I can get on the internet and download all kinds of tools to do damage to your equipment, usually cheap or free. Training on how to use those tools, there are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos that are available for free that train you on how to use these tools. When it comes to protecting your network, the tools are very expensive. The training for that, I've paid $8,000 out of pocket for one training course for cybersecurity. Literally, it's a very expensive to protect your networks. So it's a bipolar situation where it's very easy for a high schooler, a college student, somebody in a very poor economy to get a hold of free tools, free training, and then start attacking in order to learn or eventually maybe to get qualified to join one of the criminal gangs. So we see them kind of moving up that ladder sometimes if we don't step in and get a hold of them and bring them into something responsible early and help them learn accountability, we will lose them to the criminal organizations is where that one's at. So the thrill seeker. Now, I want to point out again, what we've noticed here is that the motivation for a nation state is political. For a criminal, it's money. For a thrill seeker, it has to do with learning and hobby. The resources for the nation state is unlimited. For the criminal, it's various. For the thrill seeker, it's pretty limited. Time investments, unlimited. Criminal, patient. Thrill seeker, it varies. Depends on how badly they want to know it, right? And how willing they are to work. Sometimes it depends on if they have a job that gives them the opportunity and the resources to get into it. And if you'll notice that a thrill seeker can very easily become one of the criminals, and the criminals are quite often used by the nation state. So there's definitely an attack pyramid here if you think about it, kind of an upside down pyramid. Well, let's talk about one more. This last one is really about you and I. This is the insider. This is the guy who actually works inside the company or inside the organization, the not-profit organization or whatever it might be. This insider can have various different motivations. For instance, they might just have curiosity. They happen to realize that there's a misconfiguration on SharePoint. And they see that in their SharePoint files, they can see the financial share. And so they click on it just to see if they can access it. Oh, look at that. They can. They open it up and it shows like invoice statements. And it might even show like human resource records. Or they might see, the latest salary list. And curiosity, right? I want to know what everybody's getting paid. And so they double click on it and they open it up. Well, that's a breach. They've literally just breached this private information, sensitive information, non-public information that should be kept private. They viewed it. They might change it. They could delete it. That would be an insider who's now attacking the company. Sometimes it's not on purpose. Sometimes it's accidental. This would be the guy who earlier today I thought my cursor was on one screen. It was on another one. And when I hit the delete key, it literally deleted a folder from my computer. I had to go through a process to restore that folder. But imagine that I did that on a folder that I wasn't supposed to have access to, and it was just an accident. But I'm doing damage to the company, and I might be causing issues. Sometimes it's for revenge. You let somebody go, you fire them, but before you can get them out the door, before you can get them out the door, they've already logged on and downloaded all your contact relationship manager contacts. or they maybe have deleted key information. This is very common. We've actually had several IT directors who have been arrested because after they were let go, their account wasn't closed. They logged in remotely using a password that only they knew, and they were able to go in and delete files or cause damage to the company. So revenge, right? Typically, this is not something that is put in place over years. This is just opportunity. They just happen to stumble across it. Their resources are typically few, and the target is typically a specific business or an individual. So at this point, we have nation state, criminal, thrill seeker, insider. Our motivations are political, money, learning, hobby, money, curiosity, and revenge. Okay, so there's a variety of different motivations depending on who the attacker might be, right? And you might ask, why am I going through the trouble of explaining this? Well, from the scammer's mindset, if we understand that, then we can begin to realize who we might be connecting with and what might be going on. And I really want to go a step further with this. Let's think about it for a minute. The main thing, the attackers have motivations that determine their behaviors. And it's safe to say that you have motivations that determine your behavior. You have things that make you click on links. There are times where you're going through your email so fast, and then you see this email from a specific person. They're very important to you. You don't take the time to read it well. You quickly scan it, see the concern. You click on the link, and then something has happened. Why did that happen? Why did you click on that particular link? Is it because you have they're your good friend, and you're the kind of person who really values friendship, and you need to meet them at their, at that level? Is it because you really like helping people, and these guys were raising money for a animal shelter, and that's a big concern to you, is taking care of animals, and so you quickly put your credit card information into their portal? What is it? And if you think back, all of us, hands up, all of us have clicked on a phishing link. I've always said, we got one client who says, I don't even care to do phishing campaigns because I know if we do one, if you take your time and target it properly, we will all fail. It will happen. And so it doesn't really give me a lot of good information to do those. I think there's other reasons to do phishing testing. I think it also helps inoculate us. It helps us get familiar with the types of attacks and where we can spot them more easily. But I digress. My point is that if you think back to when you clicked on something, because you have, when you clicked on it, why did you do that? So that's your homework, okay? When you leave here, I want you to go back and think about the times where you failed a phishing test or where you actually were a part of a fraud scam. Why? Why were you part of that scam? What happened? What was your motivation related to that? Do you feel like, you want to have good customer service and you're just trying so hard to help somebody? What is it about you and your makeup? We're all different. We all have different personalities. We all have different histories that determine how quickly and how much we want to do something. When the attacker's motives, I went too far, so let's back that up here. I apologize. When the attacker's motives and your motives overlap, then in that center we have the sweet spot of where you become an accidental inside threat. You may be targeted by a nation state. You may be targeted by a thrill seeker. You may be targeted by another insider. But when you are affected by your motivation and the attacker's motivations, then you become the accidental insider threat. Does that make sense to you? In my mind, this is the first thing that is foundational to everything else. Now, we're going to have a second training session. And when we go into the second training session, I'm going to talk about how to properly work with email, how to work remotely, safely. And when we talk about working with mobile devices, working with email, we're going to use this foundational concept for all of it. This is the basis of which we can say, here's the right steps to stay safe when you're working with email, when you're working with mobile devices. But in order to do that well, you need to take time to know yourself. We took some time to know the attacker, the mind of the attacker. Now the question is know thyself. Do you know yourself? Do you know why you make those clicks? When you can accurately identify why you are making the clicks you are, that's going to help you better slow down and put red flags in place when you're in those types of situations. When you're in that situation, you want to slow down. You want to consider, don't make assumptions, but take time to consider and say, is this correct? You want to take time to confirm it through another channel. What's a completely different way you can confirm it? You got it by email? Well, don't write an email back to say, are you really the person I think you are? And the attacker says, yes, I am. That doesn't help you any, right? So instead, you want to pick up the phone and give them a call and see, hey, did you just send me an email with a certain attachment? You're curious. You get the email that has to do with some type of invoice, but you're not the person who deals with invoices. So don't let your curiosity get the best of you. You stop right there. You reach out to the person and say, I think you accidentally sent me this. Is that correct? Should I delete it or should I send it back, or what would you like me to do? And just confirm it. By knowing yourself and your motivation and recognizing these different ways that attackers attack you, you can begin to identify that sweet spot for you and correctly prevent them from attacking you in that manner. The way of the schemer, I want to talk quickly about the types of attacks and techniques that they use. So the first thing that a scammer does, so we talked about their mindset. Now let's talk about their tactics and techniques. The first thing they do is they prepare a scheme. They do reconnaissance so that they know enough about whatever they're going to attack that they can sound and look like an insider. I've had the pleasure of doing physical penetration testing for clients where I have to do research on the client, understand more about them and what they're doing. In one particular case, I was working for a local credit union, and I looked at all of the branches in the area, and I found that several branches had a loan officer who was listed as an employee at all 4 branches. And what that told me was that loan officer did not have one branch he stayed at, but rather he would schedule appointments and then go to that branch. So what I could do is I could go in and act like I was having a meeting with that loan officer and that I was his boss. So I'm the boss of the loan officer. I'm walking into this credit union branch saying I'm supposed to meet him here today. We're both in the area, and so we're supposed to meet here today, but he's not going to be here for another 30 minutes. I got some important work I need to do. Do you have a place I can work? And sure enough, I had the branch manager. They came and they took one person, threw them out of a corner office, gave me freedom to sit down in that office, hook my computer up to their network. All the drawers were sitting there, some of them half open with files in them. I could have accessed anything I wanted. All because I did enough research to sound like an insider, and I developed and prepared a scheme. And then they sound like that insider as they talk. Just because someone sounds like an insider does not make them an insider. There's always more to learn about you and your organization than you realize. And so I have several links here, or several ways you can do that. I'm going to keep moving here. I'm not going to take the time on this one. I apologize. They also deploy tripwires. And what we mean by that is they put things in place to make your motivation get tripped up. We're tripping your motivation. It may be an email. It may be a lookalike domain. It may be a malicious attachment. But the one thing that's common to all of them is it will feel comfortable to you. It won't feel awkward or weird. When you do feel like something's off, you should immediately stop. So the one other type of scam that I do need to mention real quick, the one other type of scam is the really bad scam. You guys have seen them, the Nigerian prince emails. I've seen others that have to do with, hey, I saw what you were doing at your computer. I took it over and I was able to see your camera and I know what you've been looking at and they're sending me this thing. Well, I know it's false, I know it's false. Why do they send those? And usually when I ask that question in the audience, people say, because it works. Well, that's true. It does work. But it doesn't work on most of us. It only works on a very small percentage. Why do they still persist in sending those kind of scams when it only works in a small percentage? And here's the reason. It's like qualifying a sale. Somebody walks in to buy a car. I start asking, the salesman starts asking questions about their salary level, about, their home life, and they're qualifying them for the type of car they're going to buy and whether they're going to spend time really trying to sell it or let the person go. In the same way, the person who is willing to respond to the Nigerian prince email is the person that will be a prime candidate for their scam. So therefore, sometimes it's just a mass quantity of very bad scams with the goal of getting that low-hanging fruit, the people who don't understand well enough to bypass it. But for most of the other scams that we're talking about, these are going to feel comfortable to you. And so you need to be on guard. This is very important. I imagine Jeff right now is going, yes, that's true for fraud too. Absolutely. Exploiting your motivations. We usually reference this as FUD, fear, urgency, and doubt. So when you get an email that causes you to question or creates this urgency in you or makes you afraid that you're going to miss out, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out on something. When you have that fear and that urgency or that doubt, usually it's playing on this motive of what's in it for me. I want this. I don't want to miss this. I'm afraid that if I don't do this quickly, there's going to be a problem. I'm going to miss out. There's this doubt, this question of am I going to hurt something if I don't do this? I need to do it right away. That exploiting my motivation, right? That's how the tripwire works. And then they always try to leave a way back in. So that could be changing the multi-factor authentication on your email when they take it over. It may be adding a secondary email to your system. There's other things that they'll do. They'll put a change a password or add an additional password. Whatever they can do to leave a way back in. But just because you delete or you close or you get rid of that, don't always believe that's enough. You still need to talk to your IT manager, your administrator, and let them know what happened. I know, we're scared. What are they going to do? Are they going to fire us if we tell them that we clicked on that link? Are we going to be embarrassed if we tell them we clicked on that link? But the reality is, if you don't tell them and something really serious happens, then you're really going to be upset and you're going to feel really bad. I think of the comment earlier of people paying the ransom twice before they ever told the IR team. Man, you need to open up and talk about what happened. Okay, so the tactics and techniques, they prepare a scheme, they deploy the tripwires, they exploit your motivations, and they leave a way back in. If we had more time, I would take you online right now and show you a publicly available site where I can search for your previously breached passwords. What do I mean by that? Well, you've gone onto a website like LinkedIn, you put in a password, you logged in, and then LinkedIn gets breached. And when LinkedIn was breached, someone stole all those passwords. Now, they were in an encrypted format, but they took that, ran it through a decryptor, and got passwords. Well, these are older passwords that you had in the past. But when I look at like people's breached passwords, sometimes I see patterns. Like they all have a certain type of way of creating that password. So that allows me to look at their Facebook or their LinkedIn profile and begin to realize, oh, they like, this baseball team or this thing over here. I bet they use that pattern with it, and I can come up with a pretty good guessable password. Anything that you do as a way of engineering your password can be reverse engineered. And that's the kind of thing that during the reconnaissance, the attacker is going to find that. They're then going to deploy some kind of a tripwire. They may just use it to password guess and get access directly to your email. Then they'll send a phishing campaign from your email to you to get you to do a secondary thing. There's all kinds of techniques like this, and you need to be aware of it and tell your administrator. All right, so here's the main thing. We need to become aware of the scammer's common attack paths. Just because they sound like an insider does not mean they are. There is all kinds of information publicly available about you that I can easily find, including who the charities are that you like to give to, what your typical income probably is, where you're located, what types of sports and other things that you like. I can sound like an insider very quickly. I can also do that with your company. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And then you should check your own social footprint and monitor your own breach passwords. You can do that at haveibeenpawned.com. So that URL is in your notes. You can click on that. You can put in your email address, your home email address, your family's email addresses, and it will monitor them for breached passwords and send those to you. I do recommend password management tools. I love LastPass. I think it's a great tool. I also love 1Password. It's a fantastic tool. Several of these companies have been breached in the past, but their passwords have such encryption on them that LastPass also doesn't know what the password is, that it prevents anybody from being able to gain access. That allows you to use a password that you can't even remember. It's some strange random character password. By using a password management tool, you're able to protect and make sure that the passwords you're using are unguessable, uncrackable, and then you have, and it's actually more efficient. The password management tool I use, I can use it on my computer, on my phone, on my tablet, so I don't have to remember the password. Wherever I'm at, I can quickly click on the link, tell it to put in my password, it does a facial recognition, and then it does the password, and I'm good to go. It's actually faster than me typing in that long passphrase. So that's the tactics and techniques of the scammer. That brings us to the end of our presentation. I will have a second presentation to talk about taking these concepts and applying them now to how you handle email and mobile access If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to me, thomas.freeman@sikich.com. You can also reach me on my phone there, 262-317-8512. That's not a texting number. That is a number you would have to call, but we're here to help you any way we can. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.